Sure. Fadal, fadal, fadal. You ready now? Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala abdihi wa rasulihi nabiyina wa imamina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just this one? Only this one? Okay. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone, brothers and sisters. My talk with you tonight, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, is going to be surrounding a cliche, a very common statement that we make in both the English language and in the English culture. And that is the statement that says opposites attract. Opposites attract, something which is paradoxical, something that isn't supposed to make sense. It's not supposed to be that way. This is informal. People who are similar in age, race, culture, lifestyles, tastes, foods, drinks, colors, etc., are supposed to blend and mesh in coordination and harmony. But a very paradoxical reality of life, we say in both the English language and in the English culture, is the exact opposite. And that is oftentimes, not all of the time, but oftentimes, things, people, which are totally contrast, somehow, some way, draw each other, are drawn to each other, and there's some type of attraction. Opposites attract. Now stay with me. My talk, my speech is going to require a little bit of patience, a little bit of concentration, a lot of emptying your cup, proverbially speaking, for those who know about the HadithDisciple culture, and just stay with me. What does opposites attract have anything to do with the Quran across America? The book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the speech of Allah the Sublime and the Most High. But I'm going to explain that to you, inshallah ta'ala. So opposites attract. That's in English language and also in the English culture. Now, if we take a few skips, a hop, a skip and a jump, if we go just a few miles across the United States from the West Coast to the East Coast, from the eastern shoreboard to the Atlantic Ocean, Europe, mainland Europe, obviously, the British Isles, Western Africa, Saharan Africa, and we go further and further and further to the Middle East and to the lands of a different people, of a different race, different ethnicity, with a different language, and last but certainly not least, with a different culture. And don't ever forget that language and culture are supposed to go hand in hand, and they aren't supposed to be separated. Language and culture are supposed to be one scoop. So the Middle East, pre-Islam, during the time of Islam, and of course Islam will remain until the very end, so there's no post-Islam, is a very famous line of poetry by a very famous and infamous poet who said, وَتَذُمُّهُمْ وَبِهِمْ عَرَفْنَا فَضْلَهُ وَبِضِدِّهَا تتميز الأشياء وتذمهم وبهم عرفنا فضله أبدا كلا فإن بضد الأشياء تتبين الأشياء الحسنة إنما تتميز وتتبين بالأشياء غير الحسنة وإن شئت قل قبيحة سيئة. The poet, he said, how do you blame a people? How do you condemn a people? How do you speak ill and negatively of a people, and we're in debt to those people? And if it wasn't for these people, we wouldn't know who we are and what we're trying to be and what we claim to be. Opposites clarify, explain elucidate, shed piercing, probing light on their opposites. So these are two different cliches, two different statements from two different parts of the world, two different languages, two different cultures, and two different mindsets. One language, one culture says that the opposites go together. And another language, another culture says is that you don't know the reality of a thing. You don't know the beauty of a thing. You don't know the splendor of a thing until you have seen, heard, felt, tasted its opposite. One thing that we can agree upon, whether we're in SeaTac, Seattle, West Coast, East Coast, Middle East, Sahara, the forest, the tundra, the wastelands, etc., is that opposites play an extremely important role in everyone's life. In most cases, you can't appreciate a thing until you've experienced its opposite. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu arda, he is quoted to have said, إنما ينقض عرى الإسلام عروة عروة إذا نشأ في الإسلام من لم يعرف الجاهلية. The thing that will be the undoing of Islam, the reason and the cause behind the loss and the downfall of many Muslims, is when a young man or a young woman grows up who has no knowledge of the pre-Islamic state of ignorance and darkness, the dark ages before Islam. When a person only knows the sweetness of Islam, the beauty of Islam, he only knows the light of Islam, he cannot appreciate, he cannot value, he cannot truly understand and comprehend and know how valuable and how priceless Islam is. And that is because opposites attract. And that is because opposites make their opposites clear and plain. So I'm going to read some things to you by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I don't want you to just hear these words in Arabic when I render them into the English language, but I want you to think about every point and every sentence and think immediately about its opposite. That's what I want from each and every one of you. Fair enough? We can agree on this, inshallah. Every point that I mention, I don't want you to reflect on the beauty of the point or the value of the point, but I want you to think about its what? It's what? It's opposite. Because opposites attract. And because opposites make other things what? Clear and plain. قال الحافظ ابن القيم رحمه الله تعالى وأما التأمل في القرآن فهو تحديق ناظر القلب إلى معانيه وجمع الفكر على تدبره وتعقله والمقصود بإنزاله لا مجرد تلاوته وهو المقصود من إنزاله لا مجرد تلاوته بلا فهم ولا تدبر. قال الله تعالى كتاب أنزلناه إليك مبارك ليدبروا آياته وليتذكر أولو الألباب. وقال تعالى أفلم يدبروا القول. وقال تعالى إنا جعلناه قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون. وقال الحسن نزل القرآن ليتدبر ويعمل به فاتخذوا تلاوته عملا فليس شيء أنفع للعبد في معاشه ومعاده وأقرب إلى نجاته من تدبر القرآن وإطالة التأمل فيه وجمع الفكر على معاني آياته. Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy upon him, anyone who's ever heard me speak, unfortunately, anyone who's ever watched any of my videos, my classes, or my lectures, they know for sure, with full certainty, that Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah, may Allah have mercy upon him, is one of my favorite Islamic personalities. And he, in my humble opinion, is one of the most influential scholars of Islam. And only Allah knows to the extent of how much of a debt I owe to this great scholar, Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy upon his soul. He says, listen carefully and focus on the opposite. As far as ta'ammul, reflection on the Quran, then it means, he says, tahdiqu nadir al-qalb. He says it's for you to squint your eyes, to pinpoint, to look down the crosshairs, the barrel, with your heart. It's for you to squint and aim and focus very sharply, not with your eyes, not with your head, but with your qalb, your heart, on the meanings of the Quran. What does the Quran mean? What does Allah mean by this verse, by this surah, by this statement? So the opposite of this would be for the Muslim to read the Quran, memorize the Quran, even practice the Quran, but not use his or hers what? Heart. And thinking about it, which is a good thing. You have to think about it. You need to think about it. But I'm only going to use my brain for the Quran. And I'm not going to use my what? My heart. I'm going to look, but biduni tahdiq an-nazar, closing one eye and aiming precisely and aiming accurately. I want to know exactly what Allah wants from me in this verse. And I need to know exactly what Allah wants from you in this verse. And I need to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't intend and doesn't mean by this verse. So the first opposite is reading the Quran, reciting the Quran, thinking about it with one's brain, using one's eyes, lips, tongue, and removing the heart, i.e. the foundation of our relationship with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is supposed to be spiritual, psycho-spiritual. So that's first and foremost. So what's meant by the meanings of these ayats? And this, he says, وَهُوَ الْمَقْصُودُ مِنْ إِنزَالِهِ. And this is the primary objective. This is the main purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sending it down. The main purpose of the Quran being sent down is to be recited. The main purpose of the Quran being sent down is to be taught and propagated. The main purpose of the Quran being sent down is just to memorize it and to tell people, I'm a hafiz, I'm hafiz. The main purpose, the main reason why Allah sent down the Quran is just to have different modes of recitation. All of those things are what? To the point that he mentioned. That's the what? It's the opposite. How many opposites did we mention so far? 2. First and foremost is precisely looking at the Quran's meanings with your heart. The main objective of the Quran being sent down is to reflect and think, versus what we do and what many people do, even without our tongues, but our body language, our attitudes, our dispositions. They show and they prove that we have made the greatest aim, the highest aim of the Quran other than reflecting upon it. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, La mujarradu tilawatihi. Allah did not send down the Quran just to be recited. Allah didn't send down his book just for there to be words and verses and chapters. But these words, these verses, these chapters, and these sections with critical thought, critical reflection. And then Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy upon his soul, he quotes several ayat in the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself tells us why he sent down the book, declaring that the book is Mubarak and that it is Arabi. And many people, they translate Quran and Arabi and la'allakum ta'qilun as Arabic, but it's deeper than that. Quran and Arabiyan, what's meant by Arabic Quran? Is it just Arabic language, or is it deeper than that? I can't give you the answer to that right now. We don't have enough time. We can't go that deep and that far. But maybe and perhaps you can read about what's meant by Quran and Arabiyan, what's meant by an Arabic Quran. So he quotes many verses. The summary of those verses, Allah himself tells us why he sent down the book. Muslims and non-Muslims say Allah sent down the Quran because of A, B, C, D, E. But the best who can tell us who or why the Quran was sent down is Allah himself, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah Azza wa Jalla, in these verses that he quoted, he tells us some characteristics of the Quran, and he blames and he condemns, he shames many people for not critically reflecting on his words and on his book. And then he states, Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, نزل القرآن ليتدبر ويعمل به فاتخذوا تلاوته عملا. He said the Quran was sent down for people to think about it and reflect on it. So therefore, take the recitation of the Quran as a means of acting upon it. Now, listen carefully. He then says, فَلَيْسَ شَيْءٌ أَنْفَعَ لِلْعَبْدِ فِي مَعَادِهِ وَمَعَاشِهِ. Nothing is more beneficial. Nothing is more wholesome. Nothing is more fruitful. Nothing is more awesome for the slave, me, you, all of us, man, woman, and child. Nothing is better for you in this life and in the hereafter than reflecting on the Quran. The opposite of that would be what if we reversed it? What would be the opposite of that sentence? Nothing is more what? What's the answer? He said nothing is more beneficial. The opposite will be what? Nothing is more? Thank you. Nothing will be more destructive, more ruinous. Nothing is more disastrous for a slave in the hayat al-dunya and in the hereafter than not reflecting on the Quran and not critically thinking about the Quran and pondering on the Quran. So if reflecting and pondering is the most beneficial thing for you, you having no knowledge, no understanding, no interpretation, or you just recite it, you just memorize it, you just write it down, you just have a copy of it in your house, that is the mark of your ruin and destruction. Your spirituality and even your life in this world. And we can see this in the Ummah today, unfortunately. The Muslims who have a greater understanding of the Quran, a greater level of its comprehension, and those who actually think about it and apply it and practice it, look at their lives, look at their countries, look at their homes, look at their marriages, look at their friendships, look at their businesses, and the list goes on and on and on. وَإِطَالَةِ التَّأَمُّلِ فِيهِ. Number two, nothing is more beneficial for the servant in this world and in the hereafter min إِطَالَةِ التَّأَمُّلِ. Is sitting down long and hard whilst reflecting. Because I may reflect on it for a quick moment, a passing moment. That's deep. Subhanallah, I never thought about it like that. That's interesting. I never knew that. I never even heard of that. I never really applied it to my life like that. It took me 10, 20 years to really understand what Allah is saying in this verse. But it comes and it goes. Versus you forcing yourself and disciplining yourself to constantly reflect, constantly ponder, and allow the moments of reflection and pondering to be longer. And we all know the importance of length and duration. Length and duration. Studying something, learning something, the importance of length and the importance of the duration. And the longer that it lasts and the shorter the intervals between the repetition, the better and the stronger you'll grow. Moving forward. فإنها تطلع العبد على معالم الخير والشر بحذافيرها وعلى طرقاتهما وأسبابهما وغاياتهما وثمراتهما ومآل أهلهما. And that is because the meanings of the Quran will show, they will teach, they will explain, they will instruct the slave of all good in both worlds. So, not reflecting on the Quran, only reflecting on the Quran for a short period of time is going to lead you and show you all evil. You're going to be ruined mentally, spiritually, and one way or another, whether you realize it or not, even physically. The Quran and its meanings, he says, it shows you and it teaches you where the people will end up. Question that so many people ask me: am I a believer? Am I a true Muslim? Countless Muslims from around the world, literally, with no exaggeration, they say, I think I'm a munafiq. I don't think I'm a true Muslim. Am I going to go to Jannah? Am I going to go to hell? Is Allah testing me? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punishing me? How do I know? I can't give you the answer to those questions. I can't tell you what's in your heart. I can't tell you how you're going to die. I can't tell you how you're going to end up. But there is a book, and there is a place, and there are several words that you can read which will give you the clear, direct answer of what you are and what you aren't. Where you are and where you're not. And bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, will you be and where you won't be. Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy upon him, he then states, all of the roads to good, the paths to good, and the final destination of those roads and of those routes. وَتَتُلُّ فِي يَدِهِ مَفَاتِيحَ كُنُوزِ السَّعَادَةِ وَالْعُلُومِ النَّافِعَةِ وَتُثَبِّتُ قَوَاعِدَ الْإِيمَانِ فِي قَلْبِهِ وتشيد بنيانه وتوطد أركانه وفضله إلى آخره. He says, furthermore, reading the Quran, reflecting on it, it teaches you about each and every single beneficial science and discipline. Muslims and how we live as a community. This conference, this building wasn't established, it's not built, it's not run just off of Islamic knowledge. There's a great deal of worldly knowledge that's needed for us to truly practice Islam. The sound, the building, the roof, the lights. Some brothers and sisters are hot, fanning themselves, the ventilation. The Quran teaches us what to do concerning this hayat al-dunya. How to succeed, how to win. And the Quran gives us the recipe for disaster and loss. And unfortunately, as some of the pious predecessors would say, Allahumma la taj'al ghayri as'ada bima 'allamtani. Some of the Salaf al-Salih, they would say, Allahumma la taj'al ghayri as'ada bima 'allamtani minni. Oh Allah, make not those happier, luckier, with the knowledge that you gave me more than them. Oh Allah, do not allow someone who has less knowledge than me happier than me. And someone who learns and benefits and takes from a little piece of knowledge, and I have more knowledge. So we have the Quran by heart. We have the Quran written down. We have the explanation of the Quran, the tafsir of the Quran. We have the historical context of the Quran. What happened to my marriage? What happened to my country? What happened to my business? What happened to my state? What's happening to my community? And from the reasons behind these perplexing questions is us not thinking about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. So we don't have a lot of time. I don't like to go over my time. I like to respect the people's times at the different conferences. There are many things I would like to share with each and every one of you. Hopefully the message is clear. The importance of the mirror effect. If you want to know the depths of a thing, the meaning of the thing, the benefit of a thing, the sweetness, the bitterness of a thing, don't focus on that thing, but focus on the opposite of that thing. And then come back to the original thing. And perhaps, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, you will have a better and more thorough understanding of its depths and of its dimensions. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by his beautiful names and perfect attributes to make us from the people of the Quran. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the Quran a means of healing for each and every one of us from everything that we suffer from mentally, spiritually, and physically. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention. 20 minutes? Alas?
Takbir. 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 Inshallah, I want to now invite one of our folks at the Human Development Fund. The Human Development Fund, as I said earlier, is a relief organization